The wagon had stopped moving 3 hours ago, and when Theresa Turner finally crawled out from beneath the canvas cover where she had been sleeping, she found herself utterly alone on a dirt road outside a dusty Arizona settlement with nothing but the clothes on her back and a silver locket clutched in her trembling hand. The September sun of 1878 beat down mercilessly as she stood there, 20 years old and abandoned, watching the dust settle where the wagon train had disappeared into the distance without her. She had paid her last $17 to join that wagon train in Santa Fe, trusting the wagon master who had promised safe passage to California, where she hoped to find work as a schoolteacher. But sometime during the night, while the laudanum she had been given for her supposed headache pulled her into unconscious darkness, they had left her behind like discarded cargo. Her trunk with all her possessions was gone. Her small savings were gone. Everything except the locket she had been wearing, hidden beneath her collar, the only thing her mother had left her before dying of consumption 5 years earlier. Theresa forced her legs to move, one foot in front of the other, toward the town she could see shimmering in the heat ahead. The sign at the edge of the settlement read Mineral Park, Arizona Territory, and the main street looked like every other frontier town she had passed through, raw and unfinished, as if the desert might reclaim it at any moment. False-fronted buildings lined the dusty thoroughfare, and she could hear the distant sound of a piano playing badly in what was probably a saloon. Her throat felt like sandpaper, and her legs shook with each step. She had not eaten since yesterday noon, and the canteen she had carried was empty, left behind in the wagon with everything else she owned. The few people on the street stared at her as she walked past, a young woman alone and clearly in distress, but no one approached or offered help. This was the frontier, where people minded their own business and assumed anyone in trouble had probably earned it. The general store seemed like the most reasonable place to start, so Theresa pushed through the door, grateful for the shade inside. A portly man with mutton chop whiskers looked up from behind the counter, his expression shifting from curiosity to wariness as he took in her disheveled appearance. "I need help," Theresa said, hating how her voice cracked. "I was abandoned by my wagon train and I have no money, no food, nothing. Is there anyone in town who might need help? I can cook, clean, teach children. I will work for just enough to eat and a safe place to sleep." The storekeeper studied her for a long moment, and she could see him calculating whether she was telling the truth or running some kind of confidence scheme. "Might be Widow Ashford could use help at the boarding house," he said finally. "She has been complaining about her rheumatism getting worse. Cannot promise she will take you on, but it is worth asking. 2 streets over, the white building with green shutters." Theresa thanked him and left before he could change his mind. She found the boarding house easily enough, a 2-story structure that looked slightly more respectable than most of the buildings in town. The woman who answered her knock was in her 60s, gray-haired and bent, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I do not take charity cases," Widow Ashford said bluntly after Theresa explained her situation. "I am not asking for charity. I will work harder than anyone you have ever employed. I can cook, clean, do laundry, mend clothes, anything you need. Just give me a chance to prove myself." The widow studied her for a long moment. "You look half dead. When did you last eat?" "Yesterday." "Come inside. I will give you a meal and we will see if you are worth keeping around." The food, simple beans and cornbread, tasted better than anything Theresa could remember eating. She forced herself to eat slowly, knowing her stomach would rebel if she rushed. Widow Ashford watched her the entire time, and when Theresa finished, the older woman nodded. "I will give you 1 week to prove yourself. You will get room and board and $2 a week if you work out. There are 6 rooms upstairs that I rent to miners and cowboys, and they need fresh linens twice a week, meals 3 times a day, and the place kept clean. I have been managing alone since my daughter married and moved to Tucson, but my hands do not work like they used to. You will start now by washing the lunch dishes." Relief flooded through Theresa so intensely she felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Thank you. You will not regret this. We will see about that." The week passed in a blur of endless work. Theresa rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast, spent the morning cleaning rooms and washing linens, cooked and served lunch, spent the afternoon doing whatever tasks Widow Ashford assigned, then helped with dinner and cleaned up afterward. She fell into bed each night so exhausted she barely had time to think about her situation before sleep claimed her. But at least she had food in her belly and a roof over her head, and slowly she began to feel human again. The boarding house residents were a rotating cast of rough men who made their living in the nearby silver mines or working cattle on the surrounding ranches. Most ignored her completely, treating her as part of the furniture. A few made crude comments that she pretended not to hear. One older miner named Pete was kind, always thanking her for meals and asking if she needed anything heavy moved. It was Pete who told her about the town, filling in details during meals when she served him. Mineral Park had sprung up 5 years earlier, when silver was discovered in the nearby mountains. The population swelled and shrank with the fortunes of the mines. Most people were transient, just passing through on their way to somewhere else. The town had 2 saloons, 1 general store, a blacksmith, a doctor who was drunk more often than sober, a telegraph office, and not much else. "Tough place for a young woman alone," Pete said, not unkindly. "You got people somewhere. Family you could wire for help." Theresa shook her head. "No one. My parents are both dead and I have no siblings." "That locket you are always touching, is it from your mother?" She had not realized she had developed the habit of reaching for the silver locket whenever she felt anxious, but Pete was right. Her fingers found it constantly, tracing the delicate engraving on its surface. "Yes, it is the only thing I have left of her." "May I see it?" Theresa hesitated, then lifted the locket from beneath her collar. It was oval-shaped, about the size of a silver dollar, with an intricate pattern of flowers engraved on the front. Inside were 2 photographs, both faded. One showed her mother as a young woman, beautiful and smiling. The other was a man Theresa had never known, though her mother had told her it was Theresa's father who had died before she was born. Pete studied it carefully, and something flickered across his face. "That is fine work. Real silver, not plate. Where did your mother get it?" "I do not know. She never wanted to talk about the past much. She said it was too painful." Pete handed it back carefully. "Well, you keep that safe. It is valuable, and not just for the silver." 2 weeks turned into 4, and Widow Ashford informed Theresa that she could stay on permanently if she wished. The work was hard, but Theresa did not mind. It gave her purpose and kept her from dwelling on how completely her life had derailed from the path she had imagined. She had dreamed of teaching children, of having her own schoolhouse, of making a respectable life for herself. Now she was a boarding house maid in a rough mining town, and her dreams felt very far away. It was early October when Nathan Ashford rode into town. Theresa was sweeping the front porch when she saw him dismount in front of the boarding house. A tall man in his mid-20s with dark hair that needed cutting, and several days of stubble on his jaw. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, and there was something in the set of his shoulders that spoke of strength and capability. He tied his horse to the hitching post and grabbed a worn saddlebag before climbing the steps. "Afternoon, miss," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His eyes were a startling blue-gray like storm clouds. "I am looking for Widow Ashford. I heard she runs a boarding house here." "Yes, sir, I will fetch her for you." Theresa set aside her broom and went inside, wondering who he was. Something about him seemed different from the usual rough men who rented rooms. Widow Ashford came to the door, and her reaction was immediate and surprising. "Nathan Ashford, I did not expect to see you here." "Hello, Aunt Margaret. I hope I am not imposing, but I am in town for a few weeks on business and thought I would take a room here rather than the hotel." "Imposing? Do not be ridiculous. You are family. Come in, come in." Theresa watched as the widow fussed over Nathan in a way she had never seen before. The stern woman suddenly transformed into a doting aunt. She learned over the course of the conversation that Nathan was the son of Margaret's late husband's brother, that he ran a cattle ranch about 50 miles north, and that he was in Mineral Park to negotiate the sale of beef to the mining company and to handle some other unspecified business. "You will stay in the front room upstairs," Margaret declared. "Theresa, prepare the room with the good linens. Nathan, you must be hungry. Sit down and I will fix you a proper meal." As Theresa prepared the room, she found herself curious about Nathan Ashford. He was clearly educated, his speech far more refined than the typical cowboy or miner. He had been polite to her, not looking through her the way most men did, but actually meeting her eyes when he spoke. And there was something about him that made her heart beat a little faster, though she tried to ignore the feeling. She had no business thinking about any man that way, especially not someone who was clearly far above her station. Nathan stayed for dinner that evening, and Theresa found herself hyper-aware of his presence as she served the meal. The usual boarders were there as well, 6 rough men who ate with single-minded focus. But Nathan engaged them in conversation, asking about the mines and the town, and somehow managing to make even the surliest of them open up. "You are good at that," Pete observed, "getting people to talk." "I find that most people have interesting stories if you bother to listen," Nathan replied. His gaze shifted to Theresa as she refilled his coffee. "How long have you been working for my aunt?" "About a month, sir. Please call me Nathan. We are not formal around here." He smiled, and Theresa felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "Where are you from originally?" "You have a slight accent, not quite southern but something." "Missouri, sir." "I mean, Nathan, I grew up in a small town outside Kansas City. Long way from home. What brought you to Arizona?" Theresa hesitated, not wanting to share the humiliating details of her abandonment with a stranger. "I was traveling to California and got separated from my wagon train. Your aunt was kind enough to give me work." She saw understanding flicker in his eyes and kindness rather than judgment. "Well, her gain is certainly California's loss. This has been the best meal I have had in months." The compliment warmed her, and she ducked her head to hide her pleased smile. As she cleared the dishes later, she caught Nathan watching her, his expression thoughtful. When she reached for his plate, their hands brushed accidentally, and she felt an electric jolt that made her pull back quickly. "Sorry," they both said at the same time, then laughed awkwardly. Over the next few days, Theresa found herself increasingly aware of Nathan's presence in the house. He was up early each morning, often helping her carry in wood for the stove or water from the well, despite her protests that it was not necessary. He treated her with an easy respect that she was not accustomed to, asking her opinion on things and actually listening to her answers. When she mentioned that she had hoped to be a teacher, he engaged her in a long conversation about education and books, revealing that he had attended 2 years of college in St. Louis before his father's death forced him to return home and take over the ranch. "You miss it?" Theresa asked one morning as they stood on the back porch, watching the sun rise over the desert. College, I mean. The chance to finish your education. Nathan considered the question. Sometimes. But I love the ranch and my mother and sister depend on me. We make choices based on what matters most. Your sister, is she older or younger? Younger by 3 years. Her name is Caroline and she is probably the smartest person I know. She wants to go to college herself, actually. I have been saving money to send her back east, maybe to one of those new women's colleges. Theresa felt a surge of warmth toward this man who would sacrifice for his sister's dreams. That is wonderful. You must be a good brother. I try to be. He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. What about you, Theresa? What are your dreams now? I do not know anymore. Survival has become my main ambition. That seems like setting your sights too low. You are clearly intelligent and capable. Surely you want more than just to get by. His words struck something deep inside her, a longing she had tried to suppress. I suppose I still dream of teaching someday, of having my own schoolhouse and helping children learn, but that seems very far away now. Dreams do not disappear just because circumstances change. They just require different paths to reach them. Before Theresa could respond, Margaret called from inside that breakfast needed to be served, and the moment passed. But Nathan's words stayed with her throughout the day, kindling a small flame of hope she had thought extinguished. That evening, after dinner had been served and cleaned up, Margaret asked Theresa to bring coffee to the sitting room. When she entered with the tray, she found Nathan and his aunt in deep conversation. They fell silent when she entered, and Theresa felt a prickle of unease. "Set it down, dear," Margaret said, "and actually stay a moment. Nathan has something he wants to ask you." Theresa set down the tray, her heart suddenly pounding. Had she done something wrong? Was Nathan going to complain about her service? Nathan stood and gestured to a chair. "Please, sit down. This is not formal, just a question." She sat, perching on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "My aunt tells me you have a locket that belonged to your mother," Nathan began. "She mentioned seeing it when you first arrived. Would you be willing to show it to me?" The request was so unexpected that Theresa blinked in confusion. "I suppose so, but why? Please, just humor me for a moment." Theresa reached beneath her collar and pulled out the locket, lifting the chain over her head and handing it to Nathan. She watched as he examined it carefully, running his fingers over the engraved surface. His expression grew increasingly intense as he studied it, and when he finally opened it to look at the photographs inside, he went completely still. "Where did your mother get this?" His voice was quiet but urgent. "I do not know. She had it as long as I can remember." "Why? What is wrong?" Nathan looked up at her, and there was something profound in his eyes, wonder mixed with disbelief. "This locket belonged to my grandmother. I would recognize it anywhere because it has been part of my family history for decades. See this engraving, these specific flowers. They are mountain laurels, and they were my great-grandfather's particular symbol. He had 3 lockets made with this exact pattern, one for each of his daughters. This is one of them." Theresa felt the room tilt. "That is not possible. My mother never mentioned any connection to anyone named Ashford." "What was your mother's maiden name?" "Turner. Elizabeth Turner." Nathan shook his head slowly. "What about her mother, your grandmother?" "She died when my mother was young. I know very little about her except that her name was Catherine." "Catherine Ashford," Nathan said quietly. "She was my grandmother's sister, one of the 3 daughters who received these lockets. She disappeared in 1851 when she was 18 years old. The family searched for her for years, but never found any trace. It was assumed she had died, possibly killed by outlaws or Indians. But apparently she survived and had a daughter. Theresa could not process what she was hearing. "You are saying my grandmother was an Ashford? That I am related to your family?" "Yes, which means you are my cousin, my third cousin to be precise, but family nonetheless." The revelation shook Theresa to her core. She had spent her entire life believing she had no family, that she was completely alone in the world. And now this stranger was telling her that not only did she have relatives, but one of them was sitting right in front of her. "I do not understand," she whispered. "Why would my grandmother disappear? Why would she never tell her daughter about her family?" Nathan sighed. "I do not know all the details. My father mentioned it once or twice when I was growing up. Apparently Catherine fell in love with someone the family did not approve of, a man who worked in the stables. When they forbade her from seeing him, she ran away with him. The family considered it such a scandal that they basically erased her from their history. It was only because my father was curious about the missing locket that he even knew the story. So she was cast out for marrying beneath her station." Bitterness crept into Theresa's voice. "And she spent the rest of her life cut off from her family because of pride and prejudice." "Yes, and I am deeply sorry for that. It was wrong, and if I could change it, I would." Margaret had been silent during this exchange, but now she spoke up. "Nathan, what are you thinking?" He turned to his aunt. "I am thinking that Theresa is family, and family takes care of each other. She should not be working as a maid when she has relatives who can help her." "I do not want charity," Theresa said quickly, even as hope fluttered in her chest. "It is not charity. It is family responsibility." Nathan leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Listen, I have a ranch that needs help. My sister Caroline lives there with my mother, and they could use another woman around, someone closer to Caroline's age. You said you wanted to teach, and Caroline would love having someone to discuss books and ideas with. Come to the ranch as a companion for her. You will have your own room, proper wages, and time to figure out what you want to do with your future." "Nathan, that is very generous, but I cannot just impose on people I have never met." "You are not imposing. You are accepting help from family," he smiled. "Besides, Caroline will be thrilled. She has been after me to hire a companion for months, someone educated, who she can actually talk to about something other than cattle and horses." Theresa looked at Margaret, who nodded encouragingly. "Nathan is a good man, dear. If he is offering, he means it. And it would be a better situation for you than staying here, as much as I have enjoyed having your help." It seemed impossible that her life could change so dramatically in the space of a single evening. Just hours ago, she had been a friendless orphan scraping by on charity. Now she was being told she had family, relatives who wanted to help her. It felt too good to be true, and yet the evidence was right there in Nathan's hands, the locket that tied her to a history she had never known. "I do not know what to say," she admitted. "Say yes," Nathan urged. "Give it a try for a few months. If you hate it, you can leave with no hard feelings. But at least let me do this much for you. Catherine Ashford deserved better from her family. Let me start making that right." Theresa thought about her grandmother, a young woman who had sacrificed everything for love and had been rejected by her family because of it. She thought about her mother, who had died alone and poor, never knowing she had relatives who could have helped her. And she thought about herself, always alone, always struggling, never feeling like she belonged anywhere. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will come." Nathan's smile was brilliant, transforming his serious face into something warm and open. "Good. We will leave in 3 days. That will give me time to finish my business here and give you time to prepare." The next 3 days passed in a flurry of preparation. Margaret helped Theresa make 2 new dresses from fabric Nathan purchased at the general store, insisting that she needed proper clothes if she was going to be a companion to Caroline. Pete gave her a beautiful leather-bound journal he had been saving, saying she should write down her new adventures. The other boarders, even the rough ones who had barely acknowledged her existence, offered gruff goodbyes and good wishes. Nathan spent the days handling his business in town, selling cattle to the mining company and meeting with various merchants. But he made time each evening to tell Theresa more about the ranch and the family, preparing her for her new life. The ranch was called the Running A, located in high country about 50 miles north, where the desert gave way to pine forests and grassland. His mother, Louise Ashford, had been born in Virginia and still maintained somewhat formal manners despite decades on the frontier. Caroline was 22, bookish and independent, with strong opinions about women's suffrage and education reform. "She sounds formidable," Theresa said. "She is, but in the best way. You two will get along well, I think. You both have that same fire underneath the polite exterior." "I do not have fire. I am a mouse who has been running scared for weeks." Nathan shook his head. "You survived being abandoned with nothing. You picked yourself up and found a way to keep going. That takes courage and strength. Do not sell yourself short, Theresa." The way he looked at her when he said it made her chest feel tight and warm. Over the past few days, she had found herself increasingly drawn to Nathan. He was kind and thoughtful, treating her as an equal rather than as someone beneath him. He made her laugh with stories about the ranch and his childhood misadventures. And there was something in the way he looked at her sometimes, a warmth and interest that made her wonder if he felt the same pull she did. But she reminded herself firmly that he was her cousin, even if distant, and he was simply being kind to a relative who needed help. It would be foolish and inappropriate to read anything more into his attention. On the morning they were to leave, Theresa said goodbye to Margaret, surprised to find herself tearing up. The older woman had been stern but fair, and she had given Theresa a chance when she desperately needed one. "You are a good girl," Margaret said, hugging her tightly. "You work hard and do not complain. Nathan is lucky to have you helping at the ranch. Thank you for everything. I will never forget your kindness. Write to me sometimes and let me know how you are doing. And Theresa, let yourself be happy. You deserve it." Nathan helped her onto the wagon seat and they set off north, leaving Mineral Park behind. The landscape gradually changed as they traveled, the harsh desert giving way to rolling hills covered with scrub brush and juniper. Nathan kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the history of the area. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat the lunch Margaret had packed, sitting in the shade of a rocky outcropping. "Are you nervous about meeting my mother and Caroline?" Nathan asked. "Terrified," Theresa admitted. "What if they do not like me? What if they resent having a stranger imposed on them? They will love you, and you are not a stranger, you are family." He paused, looking out at the landscape. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "When Pete first mentioned your locket to me, I thought it might be one of the family lockets. My father used to tell me about them, about how 3 were made and 1 went missing with Catherine. I have been carrying around a drawing of the design for years, hoping I might someday find some trace of what happened to her. When I saw your locket, when I realized what it meant, I felt like I had found something precious that had been lost. Not just the locket, but you. A piece of our family that had been missing." His words moved her deeply. "I felt the same way, like I suddenly belonged somewhere. You do belong, Theresa, with us." He reached out and squeezed her hand briefly before standing up. "We should keep moving. I want to reach the ranch before dark." They traveled through the afternoon, the terrain becoming increasingly beautiful as they climbed into higher elevations. Pine forests appeared, and the air grew cooler and sweeter. Theresa saw deer grazing in a meadow and heard birdsong she had not heard since leaving Missouri. The ranch appeared in the late afternoon, nestled in a valley surrounded by forested hills. The main house was a sprawling wooden structure with a wide porch, and there were several outbuildings including a large barn and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. As they approached, two women emerged from the house. The older one, who had to be Louise, was tall and elegant despite her simple dress, with gray streaked dark hair pulled back in a bun. The younger one, Caroline, had her brother's dark hair and vivid blue-gray eyes, and she practically bounced with excitement as the wagon pulled up. "Nathan, you are home," Caroline called out, waving enthusiastically. Nathan helped Theresa down from the wagon, and suddenly she was face to face with her new family. Louise studied her with intelligent eyes, and Theresa felt herself being assessed and measured. "Mother Caroline, this is Theresa Turner," Nathan said. "The cousin I told you about in my telegram." "Cousin?" Caroline's eyes went wide. "You actually found Catherine's descendant. I thought you were joking." "No joke. The locket led me right to her." Nathan briefly explained the story while Theresa stood awkwardly, acutely aware of her worn dress and wind-blown hair. When he finished, Louise stepped forward and took both of Theresa's hands. "Welcome home, my dear. What a remarkable story. Catherine would be so pleased to know her granddaughter has found her way back to the family." The warmth in her voice brought tears to Theresa's eyes. "Thank you for welcoming me. I promise I will work hard and not be a burden." "Burden? Do not be silly. You are family," Louise smiled. "Come inside. You must be exhausted from the journey." Caroline showed Theresa to the blue room and help her get settled. Caroline grabbed Theresa's hand and pulled her toward the house, chattering non-stop. "I am so glad you are here. Nathan said you wanted to be a teacher. Is that true? I have been dying to have someone to discuss books with. Do you like Jane Austen? What about George Eliot? Have you read Middlemarch? It is my favorite novel. Oh, and Nathan said you are from Missouri. What was it like there?" The questions came so fast that Theresa could barely process them, but she found herself smiling at Caroline's enthusiasm. The blue room was lovely, with windows overlooking the valley and a real bed with a quilted coverlet. After weeks of sleeping in a tiny attic room at the boarding house, it seemed almost too luxurious. "This is beautiful," Theresa breathed. "I am so glad you like it. This was my room when I was younger, but I moved to the bigger room down the hall last year. I hoped we might have a guest someday who would appreciate it." Caroline sat on the edge of the bed, watching as Theresa set down her small bundle of possessions. "Nathan told us what happened to you, how you were abandoned by that wagon train. That must have been terrifying." "It was. I thought I was going to die in the desert. But you did not. You survived and found work and kept going. That is incredibly brave." "I did not feel brave. I felt desperate." "Sometimes those are the same thing," Caroline smiled. "I think we are going to be great friends, Theresa. I can feel it." Over the next few weeks, Theresa settled into life at the running a ranch. Her duties were light compared to her work at the boarding house, mostly consisting of keeping Caroline company, helping Louise with household tasks, and occasionally assisting with meals. She had time to read from the extensive library Nathan's father had collected, to take long walks in the pine forests, and to simply breathe without the constant weight of fear and exhaustion. Caroline became a true friend, the sister Theresa had never had. They spent hours discussing books and ideas, arguing cheerfully about philosophy and politics. Caroline was passionate about women's rights and convinced that women would have the vote within their lifetimes. She wanted to go to college and become a lawyer, shocking ambitions for a woman of her time. "Nathan says he will support me if that is truly what I want," Caroline confided one afternoon as they sat on the porch snapping green beans for dinner. "He is progressive that way, even if Mother thinks I have lost my mind." "And what do you think?" Theresa asked. "I think I want to make a difference in the world. I want to help people who cannot help themselves, fight for justice and equality." "Is that so wrong?" "Not at all. I think it is admirable. Nathan thinks you should open a school here. He was saying last night that the ranch children and the children from the neighboring spreads have no access to education. He thinks you could teach them, maybe start with a few hours a week and see how it goes." Theresa's heart leapt at the idea. "He said that?" "Yes." "You should talk to him about it. He is very enthusiastic about the idea." That evening, Theresa found Nathan in the barn tending to one of the horses. He looked up and smiled when she approached, and she felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Over the past weeks, her attraction to him had only grown stronger. She caught herself watching him during meals, memorizing the way he laughed and the way his eyes crinkled at the corners. She treasured their conversations in the evening when the work was done, and the family gathered in the sitting room. And she had begun to notice the way he looked at her sometimes, with an intensity that suggested his feelings might mirror her own. But she had no idea how to address it, or if she even should. They were cousins, albeit distant ones, and he was her benefactor, the man who had rescued her from poverty. The power imbalance made any romantic relationship seem inappropriate, no matter how much her heart might wish otherwise. "Caroline said you had an idea about me teaching," she said, trying to focus on the practical matter at hand. Nathan nodded, running a brush along the horse's flank. "I do. There are about 15 children within riding distance of the ranch who have no access to schooling. Their parents are ranchers and farmers, hardworking people who want better for their children but cannot afford to send them to town for education. I thought you could teach them here, in the barn loft during the winter and outside in good weather. I would pay for supplies and the families could contribute what they can afford. It would not make you rich, but it would be a start toward your dream." Theresa felt tears sting her eyes. "You would do that for me, of course. You are a natural teacher, Theresa. I have watched you with Caroline, the way you explain things and make her think about ideas from different angles. Those children deserve a chance to learn, and you deserve a chance to teach." He set down the brush and turned to face her fully. "Besides, I like seeing you happy. You have spent too much of your life just surviving. You deserve to thrive." Unable to help herself, Theresa crossed the space between them and hugged him. Nathan stiffened for a moment in surprise, then wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. She could feel the solid warmth of him, smell the scent of leather and pine and something uniquely him. When she finally pulled back, she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch, a heat and longing that mirrored her own feelings. "Theresa," he said softly, his hand still resting on her arms, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" He hesitated, clearly struggling with his words. "When I first realized who you were, that you were Catherine's descendant, I thought of you as family, a cousin who needed help. But over these past weeks, I have come to realize that what I feel for you is not at all familial." Theresa's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Nathan, I do not understand." "I think you do." He cupped her face gently with one calloused hand. "I have feelings for you, Theresa. Romantic feelings. I am drawn to you in a way I have never experienced with anyone else. Your strength, your intelligence, your kindness, everything about you captivates me. And I hope, that maybe you feel something similar." "We are cousins," she whispered, even as her body swayed toward him. "Distant cousins. Third cousins, which is legal in every state and territory. Many people marry their cousins without any social stigma." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. But if you do not share my feelings, just say so, and I will never mention this again. I will not make you uncomfortable in your own home." "I do share them," Theresa admitted, her voice trembling. "I have been trying not to because I thought it was wrong, or that you were just being kind out of obligation. But Nathan, I care for you deeply. More than I should. There is no should or should not in matters of the heart." He leaned closer, his intention clear, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not want to pull away. When his lips met hers, soft and questioning, she felt like she had come home in a way she never had before. The kiss was gentle at first, almost reverent, but as she responded, it deepened into something more passionate. His arms tightened around her, and she clung to him, pouring all her longing and hope and joy into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I want to court you properly, Theresa. I want to see if this connection between us is as real and strong as I think it is. Will you let me?" "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, absolutely yes." Over the following months, Nathan courted Theresa with a sweet intensity that made her fall more in love with him every day. He brought her wildflowers from the meadows and books from town. They took long rides together through the pine forests, talking about everything and nothing. He helped her set up the school in the barn loft, building desks and a chalkboard. When the first students arrived in early November, shy ranch children with worn clothes and eager faces, Nathan sat in the back for the first lesson, watching with obvious pride as Theresa taught them their letters. Louise and Caroline were delighted by the developing romance. Louise confided that she had hoped Nathan would find someone worthy of him, someone who could match his intelligence and strength of character. Caroline teased them mercilessly, but in a loving way, and she began making pointed comments about weddings and babies that made Theresa blush furiously. The school became the center of Theresa's world. She taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography to 15 children ranging from age 6 to 14. Some of the older children could barely write their names when they started, but they learned quickly, hungry for knowledge. Their parents were grateful beyond measure, often paying in goods rather than cash, bringing eggs and vegetables and homemade bread as payment. By February, Theresa knew she was completely in love with Nathan. He was everything she could have hoped for in a partner, kind and intelligent, strong and gentle, ambitious but grounded. He made her laugh and challenged her thinking. He supported her dreams and encouraged her independence. And the physical attraction between them was so intense sometimes she felt scorched by it, though they maintained propriety, always chaperoned, never alone in the house. On a cold evening in late February, Nathan asked her to walk with him after dinner. They bundled up in heavy coats and walked to a spot overlooking the valley, where the sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. The air was crisp and clean, smelling of pine and snow. "I have been thinking about the future," Nathan said, taking her hand. "About what I want my life to look like." "And what do you see?" Theresa asked, though her heart already knew what he was going to say. "I see you. I see us together building a life, raising a family, growing old side by side." He turned to face her, his eyes intense in the fading light. "Theresa Turner, I love you with everything I am. You have brought light and joy into my life in ways I never imagined possible. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Theresa's face as she nodded. "Yes, yes, I will marry you. I love you so much, Nathan." He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small diamond, and slid it onto her finger. Then he kissed her with a passion that left them both breathless, his hands tangled in her hair, her arms wrapped tightly around his neck. When they returned to the house hand in hand, Louise and Caroline were waiting, and their squeals of joy could probably be heard all the way in Mineral Park. Louise hugged them both, crying happy tears, and Caroline immediately began planning the wedding, talking about flowers and dresses and food. They were married in April of 1879, in a simple ceremony at the ranch with a minister brought in from the nearest town. Margaret traveled from Mineral Park to attend, along with Pete and several of Theresa's students and their families. The ceremony was held outside under the pine trees, with wildflowers decorating everything and a feast afterward that lasted well into the evening. Theresa wore a dress of cream silk that Louise had saved from her own wedding, altered to fit Theresa's slighter frame. Caroline wove wildflowers into her hair, and Nathan looked so handsome in his dark suit that Theresa could barely breathe when she saw him waiting for her. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever came, Theresa thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had been abandoned with nothing but a locket and hope, left to die in the desert. But that locket had led her to Nathan, to family, to love and belonging. Her grandmother Catherine had lost everything for love and had been cut off from her family. But now, 2 generations later, that wrong had been righted. Theresa had found her way home, and in doing so, she had found her destiny. The kiss Nathan gave her when the minister pronounced them husband and wife was full of promise and passion, and the cheers from their guests echoed through the valley. At the reception, Pete raised a toast to the bride and groom, saying that sometimes the worst moments in life led to the best outcomes, and that Theresa's story proved that hope was never wasted. That night, in the room they would now share, Nathan made love to Theresa with a tenderness and passion that brought tears to her eyes. He worshipped her body with his hands and mouth, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and desired. When he finally entered her, the brief pain was quickly replaced by pleasure, and they moved together in an ancient rhythm, 2 people becoming one. Afterward, he held her close, his hand tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "I cannot believe you are really mine," he murmured. "I was always yours, from the moment you recognized that locket. I just did not know it yet. Do you ever think about what might have happened if Pete had not mentioned the locket to me? If I had never known who you were?" Theresa considered this. "I think we still would have found each other somehow. Some things are just meant to be." Life settled into a happy rhythm over the following months. Theresa continued teaching, and her school grew as word spread about the quality of education she provided. Parents from increasingly distant ranches brought their children, and Nathan had to expand the barn loft to accommodate everyone. Some of the older students showed real academic promise, and Nathan arranged for them to take correspondence courses so they could eventually attend college if they wished. Caroline left in the fall for a women's college in Massachusetts, armed with letters of recommendation and enough money for tuition. She wrote long, excited letters about her classes and the other students, about the ideas she was exploring and the professors who were mentoring her. Theresa missed her terribly, but was proud of her for pursuing her dreams. Louise became increasingly dependent on Theresa for companionship, and the 2 women grew close. Louise told stories about Nathan's childhood, about his father who had died when Nathan was only 19, leaving him to run the ranch and care for his mother and sister. She spoke with admiration about how Nathan had risen to the challenge, never complaining, always putting family first. "He deserves happiness," Louise said one afternoon as they worked on a quilt together. "And you give him that, Theresa. I see it in his eyes when he looks at you, a contentment and joy that has been missing since his father died. He gives me happiness too. I never thought I could feel this way, this complete." In the spring of 1880, Theresa discovered she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, then set her down carefully as if she were made of glass. "We are going to have a baby," he kept repeating, his face lit with wonder. "I am going to be a father." "Are you happy?" Theresa asked, though the answer was obvious. "Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am ecstatic, thrilled over the moon." He knelt and pressed a kiss to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I am your father, and I promise to love you and protect you and teach you everything I know." Theresa ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with love for this man. "I hope he or she has your eyes. I hope they have your intelligence and strength." Nathan stood and pulled her into his arms. "Whatever they are, they will be perfect because they are ours." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Theresa had to cut back on her teaching hours in the later months when standing for long periods became uncomfortable. Her students made her gifts, drawings and wildflower bouquets, and a beautiful wooden cradle that one of the older boys carved with his father's help. Nathan was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly checking on her and insisting she rest. In November, Theresa went into labor during the night. The midwife was summoned from a neighboring ranch, and Louise stayed by Theresa's side throughout the long, difficult labor. Nathan paced outside the room wearing a hole in the floorboards, until finally, in the early morning hours, he heard the cry of a baby. Louise emerged with tears streaming down her face. "You have a son, Nathan. A healthy, perfect son." Nathan burst into the room and found Theresa propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. He approached slowly, reverently, and looked down at his son's face for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was waving tiny fists in the air, already full of spirit. "He is beautiful," Nathan whispered, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "You are incredible. I love you so much." "Do you want to hold him?" Theresa asked. Nathan took his son carefully, cradling the baby against his chest. The infant immediately quieted, seeming to sense his father's presence. Nathan looked down at his child with such love and wonder that Theresa felt fresh tears spring to her eyes. They named him James Thomas Ashford, after Nathan's father and Theresa's mother. Jamie, as they called him, was a happy baby, quick to smile and rarely fussy. He had Nathan's blue-gray eyes and what promised to be his father's strong build. Nathan was a devoted father, waking with Theresa for nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just watching his son sleep. Caroline came home for Christmas and fell instantly in love with her nephew, declaring him the most brilliant baby ever born. She had grown more confident and outspoken at college, full of ideas about social reform and women's rights. At dinner one evening, she announced her intention to become a lawyer and work for women's suffrage. "I know it is unconventional," she said, lifting her chin defiantly as if expecting opposition, "but it is important work and I intend to do it." "I think it is wonderful," Theresa said firmly. "The world needs people willing to fight for justice even when it is difficult." "Nathan." Caroline looked at her brother, clearly nervous about his reaction. "I think you will be an excellent lawyer. You certainly argue persuasively enough." He smiled. "I am proud of you, Caroline. Father would be proud too." The years that followed were full and happy. Theresa's school continued to thrive, and several of her students went on to attend college, something that would have been impossible without the foundation she gave them. Nathan's ranch prospered, and he gained a reputation as a fair employer and skilled rancher. They had 2 more children, a daughter they named Catherine Louise in 1882, and another son, Robert, in 1885. Katie had Theresa's delicate features and Nathan's coloring, a beautiful little girl who was fiercely independent from the start. She followed her father everywhere, insisting on learning to ride and rope alongside her brothers. Robert was quieter, more studious, with a natural aptitude for numbers and a gentle nature. Louise passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1887, and they all mourned the loss of a woman who had been the heart of the family. But her love continued in the children she had helped raise and the grandchildren she had adored. Caroline graduated from law school in 1888, one of only a handful of women lawyers in the country, and began working for a women's rights organization in Boston. Through all of this, Theresa and Nathan's love only deepened. They still took walks together in the evenings after the children were in bed, still talked for hours about everything and nothing. The passion between them never faded, and Theresa often felt grateful that she had found not just a husband but a true partner, someone who supported her dreams and challenged her thinking. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1889, Nathan gave Theresa a gift that made her cry. It was a painting of the valley as seen from their favorite spot, the place where he had proposed. But in the foreground, he had commissioned the artist to paint the silver locket, open to show the photographs inside. "This is where it all started," Nathan said as she stared at the painting. "That locket brought you to me, and I will never stop being grateful for that. Catherine may have lost her family, but she gained something too, something that eventually led to us. I like to think she would be happy knowing that her great-granddaughter found her way home and found love here." Theresa hugged him tightly, breathing in his familiar scent. "I think she would be happy too. I think she would look at what we have built together, this family and this life, and feel that her sacrifices meant something." Jamie, now 8 years old, was showing signs of being a natural rancher like his father, already helping with the horses and asking constant questions about the business. Katie, at 7, had declared her intention to be a teacher like her mother, though she also wanted to be a cowboy and a doctor and about 50 other things. Robert, the baby at 4 years old, was content to sit on the porch with a book, reading far beyond his years. Theresa sometimes looked at her children and marveled at how different her life had turned out from what she had imagined that terrible day when she woke up abandoned in the desert. She had thought her life was over, that she had lost everything. But in reality, she had been standing at the beginning of the greatest adventure of her life. The locket that had been her only possession had turned out to be the key to her destiny, leading her to family, love, purpose, and joy. In 1890, Mineral Park began to decline as the silver mines played out. Margaret wrote that she was closing the boarding house and moving to Tucson to live with her daughter. She invited Theresa and Nathan to visit before she left, and they made the journey with the children, wanting them to see where their mother's new life had begun. The town looked shabbier than Theresa remembered, more buildings abandoned now, fewer people on the streets. But the boarding house was the same, and Margaret was waiting on the porch, older and grayer but still sharp-eyed and capable. "Look at you," Margaret said, embracing Theresa. "A proper rancher's wife with 3 beautiful children. I knew you would land on your feet." They spent the afternoon reminiscing, and Margaret pulled out the old ledger where she had recorded Theresa's employment. "Here, look. October 1878, hired Theresa Turner as maid. I noted that you were the hardest worker I ever had. You saved my life," Theresa said simply. "If you had not given me a chance, I do not know what would have happened to me." "You saved yourself, dear. I just gave you a place to land," Margaret smiled. "And look what came of it. Love, family, a purpose. That is all any of us can hope for." Pete stopped by during their visit, now in his 70s but still sharp. He remembered Theresa fondly and was delighted to meet Nathan and the children. "I knew there was something special about that locket," he said, holding it carefully when Theresa showed it to him. "Could feel the history in it. I am glad it led to something good." On the journey home, as the children dozed in the back of the wagon and the sun set over the desert in spectacular color, Nathan reached over and took Theresa's hand. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "The way things happened, how you ended up here instead of California." Theresa thought about this seriously. If the wagon train had not abandoned her, she would have reached California and become a school teacher in some coastal town. She would have lived a decent life, maybe even a good one. But she never would have known Nathan or experienced the love they shared. She never would have had Jamie and Katie and Robert. She never would have found her family or learned about Catherine or understood where she came from. "No," she said firmly. "I do not regret a single moment. Being abandoned was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it led to the best things. I found you, I found myself, I found home. I would not change any of it. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. They made me who I am and they led me to you." Nathan lifted her hand and kissed it. "I love you, Theresa Ashford, more than I can possibly express. I love you too, always." The years continued to pass in a blur of happiness and purpose. Jamie grew into a young man who was the image of his father, taking on more responsibilities at the ranch. Katie did indeed become a teacher, opening her own school in a neighboring town and championing education for girls. Robert went to college and became an accountant, though he always spent his summers at the ranch, never losing his connection to the land. Theresa and Nathan grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies moving a bit slower, but their love never dimming. They became grandparents and then great-grandparents, surrounded by family and legacy. The silver locket remained in the family, passed down through the generations, a reminder of Catherine's courage in following her heart and Theresa's resilience in surviving when all seemed lost. On a warm evening in June of 1920, Theresa and Nathan sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over the valley they loved. They were both in their 60s now, their life rich with memories and accomplishment. The school Theresa had started had evolved into a proper building in town, educating hundreds of children over the decades. The ranch was thriving, now run primarily by Jamie and his sons. Katie's schools had inspired a movement for better education in the territory, and she had been honored by the state government for her contributions. Robert's family visited every summer from Denver, filling the house with laughter and chaos. "We did all right, did we not?" Nathan said, his hand wrapped around Theresa's. "We did better than all right. We built something beautiful. Do you remember what I said to you that first day when I realized who you were? That dreams do not disappear, they just require different paths." Theresa smiled. "I remember." "You were right. I wanted to be a teacher and I became one. I wanted a family and I found one beyond my wildest dreams. I wanted to belong and I found home." "I wanted to find Catherine's story," Nathan said softly. "I wanted to know what happened to the lost Ashford daughter. And in searching for her story, I found you, and you became my story." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Theresa's hand went to the locket she still wore every day, tracing the familiar engraving. She thought about Catherine, 18 years old and brave enough to choose love over family approval. She thought about her mother Elizabeth, who had kept the locket safe and passed it on. And she thought about herself, that scared 20-year-old girl standing alone in the desert, clutching the locket and refusing to give up hope. That hope had been rewarded beyond measure. The locket had been a key that unlocked a destiny Theresa could never have imagined, a life full of love and purpose and belonging. Catherine had lost her family, but she had gained a legacy that continued generations later. Her courage had made possible Theresa's happiness, and that happiness had spread to touch countless lives. As they finally rose to go inside, Nathan pulled Theresa into his arms and kissed her with the same passion he had shown on their wedding day 41 years earlier. She kissed him back, grateful for every moment, every memory, every day they had shared. "Thank you," she whispered against his lips. "For what? For recognizing that locket, for finding me, for loving me." "I will always find you," Nathan promised. "In this life and the next, I will always find you." They walked inside together, hand in hand, ready for whatever years remained, secure in the knowledge that they had built something lasting and true. The locket gleamed in the lamplight, a symbol of love that transcended generations, of courage that changed destinies, of hope that was never wasted. And if Catherine Ashford could have seen what her choice to follow her heart had ultimately created, the family and love and legacy that flowed from her courage, she would have known that giving up her family name had been worth it. Because love, real and true and brave, always was. The end.